John 6:57. Qui manducat meam carnem, et bibit meum sanguinem, in me manet, et ego in illo. He who eats my flesh and drinks my blood remains in me, and I in him. This again is a relatively straightforward verse in Jesus' discourse here. The main thing we want to note, I think, is the ellipsis at the end here, in which a few words are omitted. And this is worth noting because it happens frequently in Latin, just as it does in English. What would we expect? He who eats my flesh. What gender is it? Do you remember if you've been following along the previous videos? It's a third declension noun of the feminine gender. And what is the gender of sanguis? That's right, it's masculine. We've seen both of those a number of times in the last few videos. We get our words for eating and drinking here again. Again, you could have guessed the gender from these accusative endings of each of these words, caro and sanguis. But what should interest us, again, I think, is right here, what is omitted. What would we expect? He who eats my flesh and drinks my blood remains in me, and I in him. Well, if you guessed maneo, you'd be right. He remains in me, and I, maneo, remain or abide. Let's use the King James word here. Why not? I abide in him. Now we might want to note just passingly, illo here is really equivalent of eo. As with so many demonstratives in the Vulgate, some of the demonstrative force is typically lost here, and we'd be better off just substituting the simple third person pronoun. I remain, I abide in him, again, is what we would expect. But if you don't need to use those words altogether to make it clear what you're saying based on the context, which supplies enough information, Latin doesn't like us to use extra words. Remember, one of the rules that you become accustomed to when you learn the Latin language is economy. Don't use 4 words to say what you can say in 3. And it's not just because the Romans were writing on stone half the time, although I'm sure it did help make those inscriptions a little bit less expensive. This is just a repeated pattern in the Latin language. Save time where you can. And of course, it's not unique to Latin, as we also do this in English. He abides in me, and I in him.